Welcome, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I've had a lot of questions recently about the nature of the touch that we use during the self-massage series and during some of our other practices in Snake and Turtle and elsewhere. And I thought it would be useful to practice with you the appropriate kind of touch, the way to increase your sensitivity for you to come to understand the layers of your body and how we function and how best to help that circulation and flow. And so we can start by touching through cloth, for instance. Find a spot of cloth on your body and simply run your finger over the surface so that you're just touching the cloth, but not really disturbing its location on your body. If you have a big poofy jacket, you can even start there, feeling the outside without touching the clothing beneath it. Feeling that space. Feel it with your palm, feel it with your fingertips. Very often, when we're new to this process and these practices, we're sort of numb and disconnected from understanding what we're feeling. And so learning how to sense layers of connection can be really helpful, increasing your sensitivity. Touching that layer of, in my case, t-shirt, and then as you start to move, perhaps you can move the shirt itself. You can see it kind of wrinkling as I pull on it. So I'm now pushing in such a way that I'm moving the shirt, but not moving the skin beneath. It requires a certain kind of technique, a certain kind of friction, a direction of force. If I go too much in this direction, away from me, it doesn't move my shirt at all. If I push too far in, it doesn't move my shirt and instead starts to press into my tissues and the musculature. So I just want to deal with the shirt, just feeling the shirt. It's kind of a funny practice, but we're just learning how to notice how different kinds of touch affect different layers of tissue and surface differently. You can use your palm, the heel of your hand, your thumb versus the tip of your middle finger, for instance. And now we're going to sink a little bit deeper. Touch through your shirt into the skin so that your shirt isn't moving so much, but now you're pushing and pulling on the skin so that without that t-shirt there, you can see how I'm moving my skin around a little bit. You can do that through your clothing. So your shirt is no longer moving, but the surface of your skin is. Then go back again to moving over the shirt, moving the shirt itself without the skin, and then only moving the skin, not moving the shirt. Can you see how the style of touch and the level of your awareness can increase so that you are engaging specific layers of your own body, or in this case, your wardrobe. So now, touch your own skin. Anywhere is fine. Feel again. So I have some hair on my arm here, and I can just skim over the surface in such a way that it moves the hair in my arm, but not my skin. And then I can press a little harder, skimming over the surface of the skin, so that I'm creating friction, but not really pushing and pulling too hard on the skin. This is one kind of touch that we use in certain areas of the body. And now I'm going to push a little bit more deeply, moving the skin itself, the surface of the skin, kind of pinning the skin in one place with my finger, and then moving the skin around a little bit as I move my finger. And notice that you can sink just below the surface of the skin. And depending where you touch, if there's muscle beneath that, maybe you can press through to the level of the muscle. If you're pushing into places that have more body fat, then you can sink a little through the skin and start to feel that thick mass of body fat beneath there. You might feel veins, different kinds of tissue. You might feel bone just beneath the skin. Don't push on any spot that doesn't have skin. That's less helpful at this moment. So now what we're going to do, find a mass of muscle someplace in your body and sink through the skin, through that space beneath the skin, into the top level of the muscle. Feel that body of the muscle, pressing hard enough so that you're working the top of the muscle. Then press a little bit harder, sinking into the belly of the muscle. Better to find a thicker layer of muscle so there is a middle of that. And then press hard enough so that you're on the far side of the muscle, as well as you can release. If your muscles are too tight, it can be hard to push through them. And depending on where you're at, again, you can push all the way through and trap all of that tissue against the bone. Maybe you can push and you can feel a tendon there, or a ligament, the sinews in the body. And you can push your way around it. Depending on where you are, of course, you can feel one side of that tissue, you can feel the other. Up and down you can move. Find out how that tissue responds to your touch. Move around it. So what we're doing is we're sensitizing ourselves to the layers of tissue in our body. So within our practice, the self-massage practice, the most common kinds of touch that we use are one, where we, let's say, move over the surface trying to gain friction. We're heating something up, maybe at the base of the neck here. This is one of my favorite spots, or at the back of the skull, over the ears. In which case you're pushing just hard enough to press through the tissues to create movement and warmth. If you're doing it on your lower back, for instance, you're pushing hard enough so that you're sinking below the surface of the skin, perhaps to the center of that musculature, so that the warmth you're generating is sinking into the body at that level. And you would generate friction over the surface of the skin, but sinking in deeply enough so that that warmth penetrates down. We do that quite a bit. You can also, as we talked about, pin the skin with your finger so that the skin isn't moving, or the skin is moving, you're not moving over the surface of the skin, but that your emphasis is on the space beneath the skin, not pushing so hard that you're sinking deeply into the musculature for this particular kind of push, but rather finding that slippery open space just beneath. And as you allow your awareness to penetrate into that space, it's very commonly felt of as this in-between open space. And it's a very useful place to be able to feel into for the purposes of moving qi, blood and body fluids, healing the body, feeling into that space, this fascial layer as we're calling it. Remember, there's fascia all through the body. So in a way, this is almost an arbitrary layer, but it is an important level of awareness to connect with, especially as we begin to sink our awareness into our body, which is very important. Feeling that layer. And my instructor gives a wonderful series of examples. He always does. If you can study with Master Zhicheng, highly recommend it. And he says that there's a toy in the United States called the slip and slide. It's a series of, it's just a long unrolled sheet of plastic that you wet with water, and usually children will go sliding down it, if you can imagine that. And imagine trying to slide on it when there's nothing slippery there, there's no water. It's just an unrolled sheet of plastic. You jump onto it and just sit there. And similarly, there's a layer inside that you can find that your mind slips through, and that the movement, as you move the skin, you can find a kind of moist, open quality that you can allow your movement to manipulate to that particular layer, if you can feel that. And by placing your awareness there, oftentimes what you get is a sense of warmth and a fullness that begins to develop. My instructor will sometimes talk about this fluffy feeling as your qi fills and is nourished in the channels, a sense of fullness, of perhaps swelling but not in a negative context, and a wholeness. And as you work to develop that particular layer, again with this light touch that moves the skin, sinking just deeply enough below the surface of the skin to work on that layer, on top of the musculature layer, that will help to generate a particular change. There, of course, are other places where we push more deeply into the point, particularly behind the calf here, sometimes sinking into the shoulder, pressing in deeply enough so that the weight of your fingertips sinks into the belly of the muscle, deeper than the other layers we were talking about. You can do that here, for instance, and the glutes, and other places where you find it helpful. And being aware of those layers and choosing how to interact with your body, where to place your awareness, how to guide this kind of loving touch, is a wonderfully healing practice, and it's highly recommended. So please do keep your questions coming. This is a response to specific questions that we've gotten, and we'll keep the information flowing, and we'll all improve together. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Enjoy your practice.